All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Jeffrey Rosales here on TVC, giving you a voice. Today, I have an amazing opportunity that I am very humbled and honored to be able to celebrate and host a family who has contributed significantly to America economically, advocacy, and being able to uplift the poor here. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's very important for us to understand the contributions from different communities, whether it's Black, white, or Latino, especially our Latinos. We have a lot of them that serve in the armed forces. We have 60 plus Medal of Honor recipients. We have over a fifth of Medal Honor recipients actually are immigrants. 60 plus Medal Honor recipients are Latinos, where there's a pipeline here. But there's one Latino American in particular named Cesar Chavez that many of you have heard of. He was a Navy veteran and he was a civil rights leader who went on to do great things for America, where my family actually benefited by that because I am the son of a bracero, the precursor to Cesar Chavez. So today we are honored and humbled to host his grandson, Andres Chavez. Andres Chavez, welcome to TVC.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Look forward to chatting. And I didn't realize all that history, so I can't wait to dive into some of this.
Yes, absolutely. We can definitely chat more about it after the show here. So, Andres, real quick for our audience here, tell us about your background. We'd like to learn more about you, the grandson of a historical figure.
Sure. Well, my tata Cesar, my nana Helen had 8 kids. And so very similar to a lot of Mexican American families. It's a big family. There's 31 grandkids. So I'm one of many grandkids who do work like I do and kind of try to go out and share my tata's legacy. I grew up in the farm worker movement, participating in demonstrations, rallies, pickets, participating in the union conventions, and then grew up on the property which is now the Cesar E. Chávez National Monument. And so I got to really kind of learn firsthand about the impact that my tata Cesar and the farm worker movement had on this country. After attending college and kind of going away from home for a little bit, decided to come back. And professionally now I run what's called the National Chavez Center. We're the arm of the Cesar Chavez Foundation that's tasked with ensuring that Cesar's value and his legacy continues to be shared with future generations. And so we do that through a variety of different ways: historic preservation of properties and archival assets, educational and cultural programming. We have a retreat center where we bring people to come and kind of remove themselves from their daily stresses, think and strategize about how they can go out and help their communities, and a lot of other work. And then I mentioned, just the larger Cesar Chavez Foundation. At the Chavez Foundation, we do work in affordable housing. On any given night, we house anywhere from about 15 to 20,000 families at our properties all across the Southwest United States. We have Chavez Media, so very similar to what we're doing here today, Jeffrey. We have podcasting. We have a radio network. We produce content, all with the goal of uplifting and inspiring our communities and educating about what's happening in their backyards. And then we're involved in education work. We really believe that education is the civil rights issue of our time. And so we work with school districts, primarily in California, but now moving into Texas and Arizona, to make sure that students who look like you and I have an opportunity to succeed in this 21st century economy. So a lot of good work that I do with my colleagues at the Chavez Foundation, 300 of us working day in and day out to ensure that we're advancing the causes of our community and that we're there to provide critical services and support to those in need of it.
One of the things you mentioned is uplifting communities, and I think that is a powerful thing. We're like here on TVC, we're here to give people a voice to everyone, all the underserved here, and I love the fact that you guys are carrying your grandfather, your tata's legacy in that regard. What are some of the things that through your mom that were passed down to you? I mean, I can tell your humility right away. What are some other things that you guys carry as far as your grandfather's values? I mean, I know he was big on organizing, but I think he got a lot of leadership from his trials and tribulations, if you will, that he went through. So what are some
Yeah.
things that were passed down to you guys that you guys still carry forth as some guiding principles or values within the Cesar Chavez Foundation?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head there. So yeah, my dad, Paul Chavez, one of Helen and Caesar's 8 kids, is my connection to the family. And I think about the different values and lessons that continue to kind of uh, uh, really be kind of our north star, if you will, or really guide us. And there's three that come to mind. The first one is just this idea of people working together, and being supportive of those around you and those in your community. When we look at the work of the farm workers movement, I thought that Caesar, they really built a multicultural, multi-ethnic coalition. It was really interesting because during his time, it wasn't uncommon to see people, in this case, people who were very supportive in terms of the labor side of the Vietnam War. And then you had people who were against it, but all of them were on the same exact picket line advocating for farm workers' rights. It was Latinos and Filipinos coming together for the first time in 1965 that really inspired this movement that's forever changed America. And so this idea of solidarity, this idea of working together is something that we really think about and we take seriously. There was also the principle of service. My Tata Caesar said in 1968, after he fasted for 25 days around the issue of nonviolence, it is my deepest belief that only by giving our lives do we find life. And built into that statement is this idea of service to others. By giving our lives do we find life, right? And so one of the things that we do is we really try to take this message of service out and share it with folks, especially young people. What's interesting about service is that service can happen in so many different ways, and everybody has the ability to take part and be of service to others. What I share with young people, especially, is that service looks like picking up the trash around your neighborhood and making sure that it's clean. But it also looks like doctors going to work every single day to make sure that people are cared for. Or in our case, we have folks who have MBAs, people with business degrees, but who use their ability to finance and structure deals to house people who are in need of it, right? And so what we encourage people to do is, how is it that you can take your life and be of service to others? Jeffrey, what we're doing here at the podcast today is exactly that, right? Highlighting stories, giving voice, and giving and amplifying what needs to be amplified. And so there was that important principle of service. And the final one, you talked about the trials and tribulations, and that's just the Si Se Puede attitude. This idea that you only lose when you give up. And there's so many stories that could be told over and over about my Tata having conversations with individuals at critical times to let them know, hey, this fight isn't over. We got to keep on going. Or this idea of him having incredible faith in people, oftentimes more faith than they had in themselves, but him really believing that with hard work and determination, anything was possible. And so I really try to go out and share those three values. This idea of when we work together, we're stronger. It's important for us to be of service to ourselves and our communities. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this work isn't easy. It's going to get tough at times, but we must keep going and we must remember those words, Si Se Puede.
I love that. I mean, that is something that I carry with me, not just through service, but like I said, my father was a bracero, so he spent a lot of time in the Central Valley. And a lot of folks don't give a lot of credit to braceros, but I always tell people is like, if World War II, there was an executive order that was passed because
Yeah.
a lot of the service members were overseas fighting, so there was this big shortage in agriculture and industrial throughput. And I always tell people that logistics industry wins wars. Well, there's this agreement that happened between Mexico and the U.S. to bring a workforce over here, which brought a lot of our ancestors over here, right? My father, my grandfather, everyone came over here. That was sort of the precursor to your father, because he took that on because the stories that were passed on from my late father, who passed away in 2017, where there was a lot of those things you talked about, right? Some of these trials and tribulations, the economic injustice, not getting paid, what he was worth, and so those things, you kind of resonates with you. And when I learned about Cesar Chavez and all the great things that he does, and I can tell he was a man of faith. especially through the fasting,
Yeah.
believing in himself and believing in others. And I do kind of want to pivot to sort of that service, because a lot of folks don't know that your grandfather served. I mean, that is amazing. He was a patriot.
Yeah.
A lot of folks talk about certain communities, are God, family, and country. Well, so is your grandfather. So are Latinos. They are all about
Yeah.
God, family, and country. And so he's serving. I'm curious. Does your organization have any sort of history with him in his military service there? To
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is something that we've been wanting to talk about more, and I think, to your point, Jeffrey, there's a lot of Latinos who have served this country who take inspiration from the fact that somebody who's been so recognized for their work in civil rights was also somebody who was a veteran. You hit it right on the head when you said he was a patriot, and what I share with people is that he certainly was a patriot, and he was a patriot in many different ways. One through his service in the Navy. Kind of towards the end of World War II, and then also through his service to this country by advocating and making sure that people had equal opportunity. And so, yeah, my Tata Cesar was about 17 years old when he went to the Navy. He was stationed in Guam and kind of the Southeast Pacific for a period of time as World War II was winding down. And like a lot of people who go to the service, especially of that generation, he was looking to escape the fields. He was looking for new opportunities. His hopes were to go to the service and develop some skills, perhaps become a mechanic, perhaps get some type of hard or tangible skill that he could use so that he could take himself and his family out of poverty. Um, the service was the Navy at that time. They're still very segregated, and so his experience wasn't what he chalked it up to be. Ultimately, spent a lot of time sweeping decks, is what we understand, and didn't necessarily get the opportunities that he had hoped for because of some of the segregation and discrimination that was taking place at that time. That being said, there was some really good things that came out of it. It was his first opportunity to see that this world was really big, and it kind of gave him a worldly view because he was able to travel across seas. He was able to develop and form lifelong friendships with individuals that he served alongside. And the other thing is that he met my Nana Helen while he was in the service. When he was coming back home from duty during his breaks, he was at a gas station in Delano People's Market. He was pumping some gas, and he thought that the gas attendant was kind of cute. I want to say, and I can't confirm, but I believe the story goes that he actually may have been in his military uniform, and they got to talking, and he asked her after going back for gas a few days in a row to go out on a date, and so he met my Nana, and by the time he was discharged, that's when they decided to marry. And so there's some great photos of him and my Nana on the coast, and he's there in his military fatigues, and they're taking photos. And then some really great photos that we have of him while stationed overseas.
And I will tell you, a man in uniform that tends to your promotability tends to work a lot better when you're in uniform and you're trying to attract a partner there. So I'm sure that was a really good deciding factor, and your grandmother made a wise choice.
I think so. My
In doing
Nana
that.
said he couldn't dance, so it wasn't his ability to dance.
Hey, I hear you, man. I have two left feet, so
Yeah.
it's one of those where, but I love that. I love the fact that he was able to get a broad perspective of the world, Andres, and that's really important when you're building organizations, or you're because you need to get buy-in from people, as you know, and sometimes that's working with different cultures, understanding their challenges, understanding their problems, and then how can you guys have a shared mission together, right? How can you guys fill in that gap, as we always like to say, so where we can meet in the middle? And the other thing you touched on is, and that still happens today, a lot of people, for me, when I left Fresno to join the Marine Corps, it was in poverty. A lot of people joined the service because of poverty. However, the service does change you, and it gives you ample opportunities from leadership to team building, culture, camaraderie. and it's one of the best leadership institutions, and I think that may be something your grandfather may have picked up on, because like you mentioned some things, some inequities, if you will, but those things you learn from them, and then once you get out, you can find a way to actually solve them, because now you have a little more freedom of maneuver, right? You're not taking
Yeah.
orders anymore. And so I think that was maybe a formidable, because we always learn the best leadership nuggets from, it's not necessarily the good leaders, but also the bad leaders, because we say, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do what
Correct.
this guy is doing here. And so I think that's very powerful. And there's no films or books that really talks about his service per se, right? I think the only film that I saw was back in 2012, 2014. Didn't really tie into his service. I think it was
Yeah,
like,
there's not too much about his time in the military. It was 2 years that he served, and
right.
like I said, we have some great photos in the archives. I believe a couple letters, and then just anecdotal stories that we were able to pick up. But Jeffrey, you were mentioning something right now, and I just made a connection in my head, and I don't know this to be true, but I ought to believe that it was true. My thought that Caesar, I think during this time is also when he developed his kind of curiosity for reading. I thought that only attended the eighth grade. And then, later in his life, when he was introduced to his parish priest, that's when he really began to divulge into reading. But what was interesting is that when my Tata was doing his work, oftentimes he would go and look at people who maybe weren't as ideologically aligned with them, or who weren't speaking the same language as an activist would, or as an idealist would. And so he began doing a lot of research on planning and strategy and other books. And at one point, he was bringing in former military planners who had developed these systems to come in and teach his team how to plan. And so I ought to believe when he was during his time in the military, he had seen the efficiency and its ability to develop and plan and strategize. And I ought to believe that all these years later, it was him reflecting maybe on some of that time that influenced his ability to really be, one of the best strategists that probably of all time, I would say. My dad asked him one time, um, Dad, how would you like to be remembered? And he said, I'd like to be remembered as a strategist, because he felt like he was pretty good about looking at issues, trying to better understanding them, and then allocating resources or whatever was needed to be able to address those issues. And he figured that, by the time the opposition caught up to him, it would be about 3 years or so. But then he'd already figured out his next move, and I had to believe that some of that was influenced by his time in the Navy.
Yeah, absolutely. I am confident. So what you're telling me is your dad was definitely an admiral, even though he did serve. He served 2 years in the military. Because your dad was thinking like an admiral or a general. Your dad was already a general.
Yeah,
Just, I mean, the fact that he had that type of foresight and the exposure that he got, especially being on missions or learning how to, like you said, how to aggregate teams and resources to achieve an objective like that. That planning is, it takes a lot of work. Let me tell you,
and,
from that perspective, right? Because to achieve a goal and then understand that there's going to be fierce opposition and resistance, and then how do you counter that
yeah.
resistance, right? A lot of folks in the military, we read what's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and I'm sure your father may have come
It's
across that
it's
as well.
it's in his library. It's in his
Yeah,
library.
yeah. So
Yep.
that's that, and thank you for sharing that, because a lot of folks, through this formal education that we have from K to 12, even if they drop out at eighth grade, I because trust me, I hear you, right? I mean, when I came back and I used thank God for the GI Bill, because I developed that curiosity as well for reading. When I got back to college as a veteran, things just came more quicker and natural to me, where I really didn't need to study these big old long textbooks that go obsolete every year, and then you have to renew them and then you forget about it. But if you develop that curiosity as a reader, I think
Yeah.
it's very, very important, because it broadens your perspective, and I love that you touched on that. So if you're listening out there, be a lifelong learner is what Cesar Chavez was, and that's how he was able to develop that curiosity, that innate ability to be very creative as well, because his tactics I read and his strategies is not for the faint of heart. In today's world, if someone, everybody has a TikTok mindset, and if they don't get something in 30 seconds, that's it, it's over. But your grandfather went through a long period of suffering to achieve an objective, and that is very worthy of something a general would do or an admiral would do. So I can understand that. So speaking of generals and admirals, now I want to talk about this topic here in particular, Andres, because I had on the daughter of Roy Benavides, Yvette Benavides. She's an educator in Texas. For those of you who don't know, he is the actual Rambo, not some guy that Hollywood has shown you. He is the actual Rambo who served in Vietnam, who took a knife to a gunfight, took 40 wounds just to help his men. He received the Medal of Honor by President Reagan. And just recently, in the Pentagon, his photo and his plaque and memorabilia was taken down over a policy shift. And so, that was a blow to the Benavides family. And then we'll follow shortly after that is another general who just received the Medal of Honor by President Biden in January. General Cavazos, Korea and Vietnam veteran who received the Medal of Honor. A base was named after him, called Fort Cavazos, named after Fort Hood, and now apparently it's going to be renamed back to Fort Hood. And now this new story that just came up where ships are being renamed, and one of those is Cesar Chavez and other civil rights leaders like Harriet Tubman, and I believe Dolores Huerta and Harvey Milk as well. And so, Andres, I'd like for you at least to kind of share your thoughts and your family's immediate thoughts on, how has that impacted you guys so far?
Yeah, I hearing this information about Mr. Benavides and Cavazos, I just think about I think that's more upsetting to me just hearing that, right? The sacrifice that they both made to protect the freedoms that we have here is just it really speaks to kind of the wholesale erasure that we're seeing of the contributions that Latinos have made to this community. You mentioned them talking about the USNS Cesar Chavez and looking at renaming it. What I'll share with you is that so much of the tactics that my Tata Cesar used in the farm worker movement were nonviolent tactics. It was something that he fervently believed in, something that was inspired by the work of Dr. Martin Luther King that he looked up to, that he wanted to model to a certain extent. And so when the decision about whether to have a ship named for him was brought up and it was brought to our attention, at first, in all honesty, we were a little unsure because so much of his legacy had been built around nonviolence. But it was really the urging of Latino veteran groups from throughout the country and groups in San Diego, Latino shipyard workers who encouraged us to accept this honor. And part of the reason why they encouraged us to accept this honor was precisely for the fact that the contributions of Latinos had never been fully acknowledged. There's Latinos who have served this country dating back to the Revolutionary War. And you talked about, I think you said a fifth of Medal of Honor recipients are of Latino descent, right?
Are immigrants, yes.
Are immigrants.
And 60 plus Medal of Honor recipients are Latinos, where with a pipeline of hundreds that have not been recognized yet. But go ahead.
Just incredible. And so, the fact that I haven't known this as somebody who considers himself a proud Chicano, somebody who loves history, right? I think talks about kind of this failure to recognize the important contributions that we make to this country, especially through our armed forces. And so at that point, we realized, it's important that we accept this honor of having a U.S. Navy ship named for my Tata Cesar. And we did it because we wanted to ultimately highlight that. It wasn't just that Cesar Chavez's name was going to be on the side of the ship. It was for all those Latino veterans who sacrificed so much to ensure that we have the freedoms that we have here today. And what was incredible about that ceremony, the christening ceremony there in San Diego on May 5th, 2012, was that they had launched 14 ships with that fleet. And to our understanding, the largest audience and the largest crowd that they had lining the streets near the shipyard was for the USNS Cesar Chavez. and it was really Latino veteran groups and other Latino veterans from all throughout the country coming to witness this historic occasion. I think that's what it spoke to. And so, when we hear this news, it's tough to be surprised by anything that we're hearing coming out of Washington, D.C. right now. There just seems to be a lot of different outrages impacting different communities and impacting different parts and sectors of our economy in this nation. And so we weren't terribly surprised, but we were incredibly disheartened by it. But again, I'm just thinking about some of this I didn't know about the photos being taken down in the Pentagon and Fort Hood being renamed. I had no idea, and so I think that's more disheartening. And if anything, it speaks to a larger effort that I think we as a family and as an organization need to do to work with those others, the other families, the other organizations, to ensure that we don't see the erasure of our contributions to this country.
Correct. And thank you for sharing that. I think this is a unifying moment that for us, and obviously also with our African American brothers and sisters as well, right? Jackie Robinson's plaque also got taken down, and so there's he was also a veteran. So my biggest thing, and the reason why that's important, what you just said, Andres, because I have nephews and nieces, and every day they open up a textbook or they see something on the media, and it's usually not people that are from the same culture or the same background. And the reason why that's so important is because when I chaired Latino business resource groups or Latino veteran business resource groups, I would always bring in people, Fortune 500 CEOs or politicians or government leaders or community leaders like yourself, because what I want them to say is because a lot of times folks don't see themselves because they don't see themselves there. They're like, well, I can't aspire to that role. I can't aspire to be the president of the United States or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And that's hogwash. That is hogwash. And so we have to find a way to change that narrative, because sometimes there's a lot of fake narratives, right? And so that's what the youth see. So something like this is so important from a historical context, because I want our future generations to be able to learn about our ancestors or leaders like a Cesar Chavez or like a Roy Benavides, which we're going to get him a movie, and your grandfather as well. We're going to figure out a way to do that. But it's so important because they need to see themselves there, Andres. If not, then they're just going to, and obviously you're from Central Valley. I mean, if you only understand it, right? I'm from Fresno. It's all farms. It's all agriculture. And sometimes a lot of folks don't get out. And we stay there. And, for me, I was like, I have to go see the world. I have to get out, right? Because 9/11 happened when I was in middle school. 7 years later, that was something that was planted in my head, and I still remember that, right? My mom was making me a chorizo burrito, right? You were talking about making chorizo earlier, and so that was something that was it was implanted in me. It was just, okay, I got to serve. I got to serve. I got to figure out a way to serve. And it's so important for the youth to see that, to see the contribution, to see that. How Cesar Chavez was nonviolent, which I think is more powerful than any type of outrage, if you will. And, given current events right now that we're seeing, is more powerful because the way you do that is economically. You have to find a way that the dollar is what moves in America, right? And if destroying people's businesses, no, don't do that. That is not the way. And what I loved about your grandfather's leadership is one of the things I recall is he would have people that were dissenters in his organization, and he saw that they would, react emotionally. And so he would find a way to kind of weed them out, because he said that is not what we stand for. And that's why his movement was so powerful, right? And it happens when you bring on people, because people react with their emotions and tug their hearts here. And yeah, I love to connect you with the Benavides family as well. See if there's some alliances there. I don't know the Cavazos family, but we can find a way to reach them out here. So bottom line, Andres, is has there been any type of support from at the political level? Are there any bills that are being passed? What is next? I want to figure out how I can rally the troops here. I will be attending an event at the American Latino Veterans Association here in San Diego on the 25th. I'd love for you to attend if you can. If not, maybe video conference in, and we can figure out a way to make that happen. But how can we help support and maybe stop something like this to happen, right? Because I think it's so important for us to make sure we continue to tell his legacy and his story of your grandfather.
Yeah, to our understanding, the ship hasn't been renamed yet. I believe the Secretary of Defense had a recommendation of ships that should be renamed, and then there was also, I believe, the Biden administration had sent over a list of potential namings for future ships, and so that's where some of the other names that you mentioned are on that list of potential for future ships. And at this point, we've ultimately decided to sit tight, and kind of wait to see what pans out. And if we see that that what they're talking about is more material, then at that point, it is going to be important for us to mobilize everybody we can, not just around the ship, but around all these other examples that you're pointing out. And so, I wish I had more for you, but other than to say, let's just kind of stay vigilant, let's stay informed, and just be prepared so that when that call to action does go out, we're ready to stand side by side, and mobilize, and make sure that we get to uphold these important parts of our history.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's probably something your grandfather would that's passed down to you as well, right? Let's not react right away. Let's just kind of be calm and still, and then if they do decide to do that, then we'll figure something out on how to mobilize and get organized here. I pray that does not happen. I think I
Yeah.
saw a potential draft bill from folks on the left that
Okay.
to try to negate that. I think that just came out a couple of days ago, but I really pray that does not happen. If you're listening here, you're an ally, you're a veteran. Um, Please understand that renaming someone like this, it's a detriment to all 65 million Latinos in America and around the world, for that matter. That is not something we take lightly here. And as Andres said, Cesar Chavez was our MLK, and he was someone who was a man of faith, a patriot. And if you are at the Pentagon and you're listening to this, please don't do that. That is, we're asking you kindly to not do that. That is just not. Don't put us in that position here, because, as Andres said, renaming the Cesar Chavez was not just about someone who was a community leader, civil rights leader, economic rights leader. He was someone who is representing all the Latino veterans. So that includes all the ones that won the Medal of Honor, or the ones that brought the Silver Star, or the ones that ones that are Medal of candidates and they haven't gotten the Medal of Honor yet, because there's some of them as well. So that he's representing us in that perspective. So it's a huge blow to the community here. So I hope whoever's listening, please understand, work with your legislators if that does happen, and just make sure that we're here to get organized and unified if that does happen. So Andres, I'd like to maybe turn it over to you for any final thoughts, comments, and I look forward to hopefully maybe having a part two, getting to know more your organization, and seeing if there's a way we can collaborate in the future.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to kind of talk about this, and for reaching out to us. And thank you for your service. And to all those who are
Thank you.
listening, who are veterans, thank you all for your service as well. Yeah, I think we're at an interesting time. And I think regardless of where you line up politically, whether you're the left or the right or the center, I think when we begin to see that folks who have made important contributions to this country, especially through military service, and their involvement in their communities by creating access and equal opportunity for folks. And when we see that those histories are trying to be erased, it should be a signal to all of us to really think and reflect as to what this country truly stands for, to reflect on the freedoms that you fought to protect. And so, I just ask us to reflect on that, to think about it. And then I think the other thing is that, if we do begin to see an attempt, and it sounds like some of it's already happened, about the wholesale erasure of the contributions of veterans, especially those who are Latino. If we start to see them trying to get rid of that history, I think we all have an obligation. And based off what you're sharing with me, Jeffrey, if there's anybody involved, or connected with General Cavazos's maybe advocacy efforts to reinstate that name or to keep that name, or with Mr. Roy Benavides to ensure that that his photos, his photos and his story continue to be highlighted and shared. Please find a way to reach out to us so we can see how we can work together, because I reflect back on what I shared with you earlier in the conversation, this idea of that we're stronger when we work together. And so that's the message that I'm leaving with here today. Is that know that there's an ally with the Chavez family and the Chavez Foundation in ensuring that these important histories and these stories continue to be told, and that our history will not be erased. And so I leave you with that. And even if we do face a dark period, for however long it may be, that doesn't mean that we can't come back in 3.5 years or longer to advocate to make sure that our stories keep on going. Because if there's one thing that my Tata Cesar taught us is that, the work that we do, it's not like a baseball game where after 9 innings, somebody loses and somebody wins, or a political race where on election day you have a winner and a loser. In our work, you only lose when you give up. And so you have a commitment from us to not give up and march right alongside you to ensure that we preserve important parts of history.
Andres, thank you so much for joining us on TVC. We look forward to having you back. And ladies and gentlemen, please, if you want to get involved, people go to the Cesar Chavez Foundation.org?
Yeah. Social media, if you look up Chavez Foundation on Instagram, or if you're on Facebook, Cesar Chavez Foundation, probably the place to be most up to speed with everything that's going on within our organization. And then for our website, www.chavezfoundation.org. And that'll be where we'll be getting information about this as we learn more. But like I said, at this point, we're staying calm, and we're gathering more information, and then we'll determine how we react.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Andres. I hope you have a great rest of your Saturday and weekend, and we look forward to having you back. TVC
Thanks,
signing
Jeffrey.
out.
Appreciate it.